There is a moment in the original tale of Pinocchio that almost no one speaks about, a moment where the cheerful wooden boy, the symbol of innocence and childhood, is found hanging lifeless from a tree, swinging in the cold Italian wind like a warning to anyone who dared to disobey. This is the part Disney never mentioned. This is the part your childhood never saw. But why? Why would a story we now associate with warm nostalgia, gentle lessons, and bright-eyed wonder once contain imagery so brutal, so bleak, that even adults flinched when they first read it? What if the tale of Pinocchio was never meant to comfort children, but to frighten them into obedience? And what if the wooden boy wasn't a symbol of hope at all, but a vessel for a much older fear, one carved deep into the heart of European folklore? Tonight, we peel back the lacquered paint, the smiling facade, and the soft bedtime charm. Tonight, we look at the raw wood beneath. Because the truth is simple and unsettling, Pinocchio's original story was never for kids. Are you ready to see what lived in the shadows of the puppet strings? Most people today remember Pinocchio in the way Disney crafted him, a harmless, curious boy of polished pine, a little mischievous, yes, but sweet, gentle, innocently clumsy. He lies, his nose grows, he dreams, he becomes real, a charming fable about honesty, bravery, and finding one's way. But this soft, glowing version is a mask, an illusion shaped by a studio determined to sanitize something far darker, something that once existed to terrify, not to inspire. Because the original Pinocchio, written by Carlo Collodi in the late 1800s, wasn't a celebration of childhood. It was a condemnation, a bleak portrayal of temptation, consequence, and punishment. And the puppet himself, he wasn't a lovable scamp. He was wild, impulsive, defiant, a creature closer to a cursed object than a child. The story we know today has been bleached clean, but beneath that polished surface lies an older truth, a truth carved from the fears of a society struggling with poverty, superstition, and the changing world of the Italian countryside. And to truly understand why the tale became so dark, we must go back to where it all started, back to the very first spark that led to a wooden boy walking the earth. The story of Pinocchio did not begin in a warm workshop filled with the scent of sawdust and the glow of a flickering lantern. It began in a harsher world, a world where wood was not just a material but a living presence, where forests loomed like sleeping giants, where every tree seemed to whisper of things ancient and watchful. Italy in the late 19th century was a nation struggling to find itself. Rural villages were steeped in superstition, and the boundary between the living and the not quite living felt thin, as though a careless gesture or a wrong word might disturb something unseen. Woodworkers, carpenters, sculptors, puppet makers were believed to wield a strange kind of power, shaping life out of dead matter, coaxing voices from the grain. And before Collodi ever wrote a word, tales circulated through the Italian countryside of enchanted logs, bewitched puppets, and wooden figures that moved without strings. Some stories were harmless, most were not. These tales were often whispered beside hearth fires, told to warn children not to wander into the forest alone, not to trust the strange music drifting between the trees, not to follow shadows that looked a little too much like people. But there was one story, older than the others, that lingered in village memory. The belief that certain pieces of wood, especially those cut from trees struck by lightning, held a spark of unpredictable life. They were said to be restless, disobedient, cunning. Collodi knew these stories. He grew up with them. They haunted his childhood. And when he began writing The Adventures of Pinocchio in 1881, publishing it in small serialized chapters, he didn't craft a gentle fable. He wrote something closer to a nightmare that disguised itself as a lesson. The earliest chapters of his tale reveal a world steeped in this folklore. The very first page doesn't show Geppetto carving a boy out of love. Instead, it shows a carpenter discovering a log that whispers, a log that speaks, a log that mocks him, a log that seems alive before a single tool touches it. And in that moment, when an object made of dead wood shows signs of life, Collodi pulls directly from those ancient superstitions. To the people of his era, a talking log was not whimsical, it was threatening. From the moment that living wood is found, the story is set on a path that feels older than literature, older than childhood itself. It feels like a cautionary tale whispered by firelight, shaped by centuries of fear, fear of the unknown, fear of the wildness in children, fear of anything that refuses to obey. By the time Collodi finished crafting the earliest parts of Pinocchio's world, it was clear this was no simple children's story. This was a tale rooted in superstition, survival, and danger, a reflection of a world where every choice carried weight and every mistake had a consequence carved in stone. But as the tale continued, something darker began to seep in, something that transformed the puppet's journey from a simple lesson into a grim descent. A shift that revealed the story's true intentions and Collodi's true fears. Now we step into the part where the tale grows teeth. As Pinocchio's journey unfolds in Collodi's original text, the world around him becomes increasingly hostile, almost predatory, as though the universe itself is waiting for him to fail. The puppet is not guided by gentle lessons or soft-spoken mentors. Instead, he is met with cruelty, deceit, and relentless punishment. Early on, he crushes the talking cricket. Yes, crushes, not out of malice, but out of the instinctive defiance of a creature born without conscience or restraint. In Collodi's telling, Pinocchio is not merely mischievous, he is chaotic, impulsive, shaped by a restless life force that has not yet learned obedience, and the world responds to this chaos with violence. He is tricked, robbed, imprisoned. He is mocked by adults and tormented by children. He wanders through landscapes where hunger bites harder than regret, and every path seems to lead toward danger. But the darkest event arrives early, so early that modern audiences can't imagine it ever existed. Pinocchio meets two seemingly friendly figures, the fox and the cat. They soothe him with false promises, lure him with visions of easy fortune, and guide him into a forest as black as ink. There, beneath the skeletal branches, they attack him, not comically, not playfully, brutally. They tie a noose around his neck, they hoist him into the air, and they leave him hanging, left to die in the night wind. Collodi describes the moment without flinching. The wooden boy is strung from a tree like a criminal, his tongue protruding, his body swaying as the forest watches in silence. It is shocking even by today's standards, and at the time children were meant to read this. But this violence wasn't random. It echoed the harsh realities of Italy's lower classes, where crime, hunger, and danger were constant companions. Parents used dark stories to keep their children close, to protect them from the world by frightening them into obedience. Collodi wasn't crafting fantasy. He was reflecting an environment that swallowed the disobedient whole. As the serialized tale continued, chapter by chapter, the puppet's world did not soften. It curdled. It twisted into visions of children transformed into livestock, boys trapped inside circus cages, and liars punished with grotesque deformity. The magic in Collodi's story was never enchanting, it was punishing, like an ancient force correcting what it saw as flawed. Every time Pinocchio strayed, the world struck him with another consequence. Every mistake carved deeper into his wooden flesh. This was not a story of growing up. It was a story of surviving long enough to learn fear, and buried beneath the nightmare was something deeper, a message Collodi believed his generation had forgotten. The message arrives in the form of a revelation, one that shifts the entire meaning of the story. When you strip away the nostalgia, the revisions, the soft music and painted smiles, Pinocchio becomes a psychological mirror reflecting something uncomfortable. The story isn't about a puppet learning to be human. It's about a child learning to fear consequence. It's about obedience carved into the soul, about the death of innocence through struggle, pain, and punishment, about a society that believed children were born wild and had to be shaped, sometimes violently, into acceptable Adults. Pinocchio's world punishes wonder. It punishes curiosity. It punishes the untamed spark inside every child, because that spark is dangerous. That spark resists control. And so the story ends not with freedom, but with compliance. Not with transformation, but with surrender. Pinocchio becomes human only when he stops being himself, when the wild creature inside the wood falls silent. This is the warning at the heart of the tale, that society will not rest until every voice of disobedience, every flicker of rebellion is carved away. Pinocchio was never a celebration of childhood. It was a warning to destroy the wildness in children before the world destroys them. And so the Wooden Boy's true story leaves us with one haunting truth, that sometimes the moment you become real is the moment you finally stop being alive.